Looks like we are live. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We are going to give everyone a few minutes to join. And just watching. So, as you guys are joining us, welcome to the MAX Mentorship webinar. This one is a special one for public sector. I see a few of us are joining from different places. So we'll get to know you quickly soon. I'll give it another minute or so. I know some of you are grabbing lunch, and if you're on the West Coast, just grab a coffee, maybe water, because the day's getting started here. So I'll give it a couple of minutes. So if you're just joining us, there is a Slido that that's on your screen, a Slido number. So this is to have you participate. This is an interactive webinar, so we want to learn a bit about you as well. So please join the conversation at Slido, and as we start the presentation, start the webinar, you'll see questions appearing on your Slido. We would love to hear from you, would love to know you a bit more about our audience as we get into this. All right. So I think we have good critical mass, and we will have people trickling in. So once again, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Misbah Naseer, and I welcome you all to this special MAX Mentorship webinar on public sector pathways, access, advancement, and leadership. I acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Surrey, British Columbia, where I am an immigrant and have been raised and living on the traditional territory of the Samiamu, Katsi, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kikite, and Tsawwassen First Nations. I would like everyone to take a moment to honor the ancestral grounds that you are joining us from, and let's remind ourselves to respect and nurture our relationship to the land and its first peoples, both past and present. So thank you, everyone. I'm your host, Misbah Naseer. I'm joined by two senior executives, Tipu Khwaja and Aisha Zafar, and they are representing provincial and federal government leadership today. So before we get into our formal introductions, I would love to get a quick sense of who is in the quote-unquote room. Please take a moment to join us on Slido and share a bit about yourself. Where are you joining from? What stage of your career are you in? And a little bit about your experience or your aspirations for executive leadership. So we'll give you a minute to log in. Oh, hometowns in the house. Surrey's here, Mississauga, Toronto, Woodbridge. Okay, Toronto's getting bigger. It's a word cloud, so where we have more people joining from, you'll see the cities getting bigger and bigger. All right, Ottawa's in the house. So we're seeing nice mix, some West Coast, some Alberta, Newfoundland. Welcome, everyone. So a bit of coast to coast to coast going on here. We'll give it another few seconds and jump to the next one. All right. So, a bit about our audience. What stage best describes where you are in your public service career right now? Do you want to join public service, or you are currently in public service, or you're just curious? No plans right now, but just want to hear what it's all about. Okay. Interesting mix going on here. Some current public servants, a lot of aspiring public servants. That's refreshing. Okay, so a lot of aspiring public servants. That's wonderful. Uh, the next one is a bit open ended, but I want you to kind of take a moment and think about what excites you or what makes you think a little harder when you think about stepping into executive leadership. You can be anywhere in your career right now, but if you think about executive leadership, what comes to your mind? The meaningful work to be done, making an impact. Impact, yes, for sure. Serving all Canadians. Strategic decision making, doing the change at the system level. Yeah, all very strong reasons. Influence, real change, influence again. So the power of influence, the impact that you make at the executive leadership level, particularly in public sector, and the impact it has on the lives of Canadians, whether at provincial level, at federal level, municipal level, bottom up and top down collaboration for sure, and helping people make informed decisions and bring real change. So thank you so much for sharing some of that insight. I will get more into the reasons why our executive leaders got into the leadership. So we'll talk about their leadership journeys today, what kind of what influenced their careers, and some tips that they may have to share. And at the same time, we have myths about the public sector. Maybe they can help us bust a few of them, or so that's with all that we'll get into the introductions. So I right now serve as the national co-lead of the MAX Mentorship Program, which runs in which started in 2017. Alhamdulillah, it has now expanded to 5 cities across Canada. Professionally, I'm also a public servant, and I've served in managerial and executive roles in the federal public service. For the past 15 years, I've had particularly the honor and privilege to serve Indigenous peoples of Canada. So today, I am actually here not just as a moderator, but also as a learner. Like many of you, I'm looking forward to hear from our senior executives the realities of leadership, what it looks like in public sector, the lessons they have gathered along the way. So without further ado, I'll turn to our panelists. We'll start off with Aisha Yu. Can you briefly introduce yourself and maybe along the way share one or two early experiences that have shaped how you lead in the public service today?
Absolutely. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Misbah. Really happy to be here. So, as you know, my name is Aisha Zafar. I am the Assistant Deputy Minister for Migration.
Sorry, Misbah, maybe I'll go first. I think Aisha's just having some audio issues.
Oh, I'm able to hear her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Ida, can you let us know if audio is good?
Is that better?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was talking to myself there. So I'll say it again. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you for the welcome and the introduction. So, as you know, my name is Aisha Zafar. I am the Assistant Deputy Minister for Migration Integrity with Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. So we call that IRCC. I'm basically responsible for enterprise risk, so the risk across the immigration systems and in the department. I support the integrity of the immigration programs and systems. So that's about putting the confidence back in the system, making sure that people who need to use the system are able to use it. We look at abuse and fraud of the system, and then all of that national security stuff. So stuff that's really fun for me. Um, I've been a public servant for more than half of my life, so I've had a lot of experience with leaders, growing as a leader, the very challenging leadership moments as well. Um, and Ms. You asked about a couple of examples that stood out early in my career. I have to go back, but one thing that stands out to me, and it might sound silly to some of you, but it really was a key moment in terms of how I view leaders and what I wanted to be as a leader. It was like my first year of work in the public service. I was an analyst. I was really excited to do my job every day. And for those of you who are younger than me, you have to remember that 25 years ago, things were really hierarchical in the public service and kind of just in the work environment in general. So I had this director general who was levels above me, and she ended up becoming a deputy minister, one of my role models. And there was a day where she tried to print something, and she went and she put paper in the printer because there was no paper in the printer. And it sounds quite silly now in 2026 maybe, but again, 25 years ago, to see a director general that was so many levels above me doing something that at that time people at that level just didn't do was really significant, because it made me feel like I wanted to be like that. I didn't want to forget who I was or where I came from, and it's that humility. Full disclosure, I can't use a printer. I was actually trying to get my team to help me use a printer before this, but I will always try. And maybe one other quick example, a little bit more relatable for those who are thinking the first example didn't resonate. It was when I became a team leader a couple of years into my career, and I ended up leading a team of people who, up until that point, were what I consider to be my friends or my peers, like literally up until the day before. And then some of them weren't my friends anymore, and that was hard. And it wasn't because they didn't like me, but I realized in that moment that being a leader means that people will see you differently simply because of your rank or your title, whether you like it or not, and that you are held to a different standard, which is a really important thing to remember as well. You have to be fair and objective in your decisions, whether you're friends with someone or not. So it really taught me that um, I'm always going to be myself and true to myself, but the title of someone who is in a leadership position carries a lot of weight, and I want to remember that every day when I'm at work and interacting with people.
That's wonderful. I think, yeah, the right now it feels like, yes, of course, loading up the printer is not a big deal. But yeah, I've been in the public service for 15 years, and I can attest that wasn't something very, if you've worked in a hierarchical organization, that wasn't very common to see at that time. And that's a great uh, aspiration as a young public servant to carry forward when you move through the public service. So thank you for sharing that. Tipu, I'm going to look at you, and I'm looking for your introduction. Aisha shared her journey, how she got started in the public service, and what experiences changed, made her the kind of leader she is today. So how about you? Let us know where you're joining us from right now, and your journey. You'll just need to unmute Tipu.
Assalamu alaikum, Misbah. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to try and figure out, I can see the messages, you can hear me. So I'll start with my introduction, and afterwards I'll try to go up, join back again. So Assalamu alaikum and early pre-Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. So glad to see so many of you online joining us. Thank you to Misbah, Aida, and the organizers and volunteers at MAX who made this happen. My name is Tipu Kwaja, and I'm currently an Assistant Deputy Minister in the Ontario Public Service. I know I think in the promos it says Consumer Protection Ontario, so that's just one part of the Ontario Public Service that I'm currently employed in. When somebody says Assistant Deputy Minister, I often get asked, what does that actually mean? For some reason, when I try to say it's analogous to in the private sector, like a VP or an executive VP in the private sector, something that resonates with people outside the government. So I'll share that. And I know that the question also was sharing one or two early career experiences that shaped how I lead in the public service today. So I'll try to be relatively brief with this. I would say in terms of my early career experiences that shaped how I lead, I would say that my early career spans from about the age of 22 to 32. And I know we didn't ask age variation in the Slido, which is totally fine. And that really covers the period from when I finished my civil engineering undergrad to my graduate degree, and then really trying to find my footing in terms of my profession. During that span, and which is really key to my learned experiences, I first graduated during a recession, which made it very difficult to find a job in my preferred career, almost a year. Then I worked in a small engineering firm that unfortunately I saw some things that didn't really resonate with me in terms of practices with international engineers trying to get Canadian experience. Then I got laid off. I went to get my MBA, but graduated. If for any of you that's old enough to recall something that's called a dot-com bubble when it burst, which also made it hard to get a job and took about another year, and had some interesting experiences while I was trying to get my footing. So I felt like I had skills and qualifications, drive and determination that many of you probably feel too, but things just didn't seem to be falling into place for me seemingly. And I was really trying to find a job that really I could get my career going. And that's how I eventually found my way into the public sector. So in terms of how that all shaped me, those are just high level tidbits. But I share all this info because, and believe me, I'm just skimming the surface as probably many of you are in terms of your professional experiences, that these shape the type of leader I am today, because I feel like I've experienced professional struggles. I've had more downs than ups probably in my career. It's taught me to really empathize with the experiences of others as they try to pursue their career, whether in public sector or otherwise. It's taught me to be really honest, candid, and transparent with my career and the ups and downs, because I think when I was coming up, there wasn't really leaders I felt were infallible. Like what they shared with us seemed to be like it was always an upward trajectory and it's above and beyond for them. But I now know that that's not the case. So some of those early experiences are what helped shape me into the leader I am today. I will stop there, Misbah, and then I'm going to try to log off and then join back in again. So if you could, if I shows the next one up on board.
Sounds great, Tipu. We'll see you shortly. So thank you for sharing, both of you, your journey. I always find it very powerful to hear how early experiences shape leadership style. I'm reflecting at my own path. I know when I applied I was working in academia and uh, freshly graduated from university and was able to get a job in the university, and I thought that was going to be it. And then came this opportunity to work in a federal department for a couple of years, and I said, okay, 2 years, try a contract. It was in something called Indian residential schools. The file was called Indian residential schools. And I'll be full disclosure, I had not learned about anything about Indian residential schools in my schooling here. And so I was like, okay, we'll see what this is. I walked in, and I have to say that's the experience that changed my life as a public service career. That's probably the reason it has been 15 years and I have been working in the same department as it changed its name. It influenced the kind of public servant I wanted to be. It also influenced my thoughts about how strong public policy can be, and when it works, and also when it does not work, when it fails its people. So that's why the being value driven in value driven policy, how that matters. So just sharing a little bit about myself. Now, speaking of leadership, Aisha, I'm going to turn to you in terms of leadership at federal level. What does it look like? We saw in our Slido, people were talking about impact and influence. So how does influence and decision making differ at the federal level, particularly in large, complex organizations? And yours is a prime example of large and complex in the federal public service.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because the way the public service works and the structure, so you have government and then you have the public service. So public servants are nonpartisan. We are there to serve the Canadian people, but through the elected government. It's a democracy, right? We've got this democratic system. So it's a really complex sort of construct. What makes it a little bit more interesting and also complicated is that we're a federation in Canada, right? So I've had the privilege of working at both levels. I started in the federal government. I was there for about 8 years. I was able to move to the province. I was there for about 8 years, and then I came back for about 8 years. So 8 seems to be my magic number. But when I talk about the federation, it means that provinces and territories have their own governments and certain responsibilities. And Tipu can give us all of the information on that. But it's things like education, hospitals, prisons, etc. And the federal government has its own responsibilities. So, we're responsible for citizenship, criminal law, we regulate trade and commerce, and then there's shared responsibilities between the federal government and the provinces and territories, things like immigration, agriculture, those have shared responsibilities. So what I realized is at the federal level, we're pretty much creating these strategies and policies that impact all or at least a majority of Canadians. But there isn't a whole lot of direct delivery. Like we don't always touch the person unless you think about like passports or services from, ESDC or, your taxes and things like that. But a lot of what we do generally sits up here. And then the province, it's a whole different set of responsibilities. But in addition to the education system, the hospitals, the prisons, etc., the provincial government and the public service has to figure out how we take these big federal policies and laws and regulations and then use that to deliver things to Canadians, to the citizens in their provinces. So for that reason, it's really interconnected and it requires a lot of consultation and understanding each of the different jurisdictions. So when we're creating or amending legislations or policies, there's a lots of consultation that goes into it. We have federal, provincial, and territorial tables where, in each sector, leaders in the public service at different levels will get together and talk about an issue. And because it impacts all Canadians, but perhaps how it gets implemented in every province or territory is different because every province or territory has, certain frameworks or rules. It's sometimes hard to find a one size fits all that's specific enough to meet the federal objectives. You don't want to water that down too much, but ensuring that the provinces and territories aren't struggling to implement those policies. So having had, again, the privilege of working at both of those levels, I think for me, what I try to do is I always think like whatever I'm working on, what is the net result for the individual, for the Canadian or the permanent resident or the asylum seeker or that person? What does this one thing result in for the individual or the families when it moves all the way through those levels?
I think that's something that that's a question as a federal public servant I have always struggled. It's like, what's the difference between you and the province? Is this you? Should I complain to you if it's about the hospital? Who do I complain to?
Yeah.
That's my first question that you usually get to. And and it has been an eye-opening experience in terms of, yes, we are the federal government, or yes, there's provincial government, but it's a network that has to work together to deliver its services to Canadians because they're impacted by all levels and they have to work together. And unfortunately, it's more about in the times of emergencies when you see all levels working together. And when these networks are strong, you see our responses are as the whole of government at all levels are much stronger, and they serve the Canadians well. So now I will turn to Tipu to give us his take on. Sorry. Tipu is ready to give his take on the how it comes. What does it mean at the provincial level, the provincial realities, and the political priorities? How does he balance that in his role?
Assalamu alaikum. So sorry, here I go. I just wanted to, on this questionnaire, sorry for the delay to folks as well while I figure this out. In terms of balancing policy advice, operational realities, and political priorities at the provincial level, I thought I'd start by giving a couple of examples of what I mean when I hear policy advice and operational realities from my experiences, because I find like when I speak to people not in government, they don't really quite know what that means. It's not really tangible to them. When people ask government what we do, and it seems a little abstract. So in some of my experiences, for example, I was all at the provincial level, the Ministry of Transportation. There were things in terms of when I first started, it was an area called Road Safety Policy. So if you can think of like the Highway Traffic Act and all the different laws when you're driving, because that's something a lot resonates with a lot of you. There are laws for against distracted driving with your cell phones, or drinking and driving, drug impaired driving, etc. When I first started, those laws didn't necessarily exist. And there was advice being sought from the government, from their bureaucrats, in terms of what can be done to improve road safety. And we did a lot of research, data, jurisdictional scans, et cetera, and gave our best policy advice. So that's just one example. In terms of operational realities, there are other areas that are quote unquote operational parts of the government, regardless of level of government. And those are basically, you can imagine the frontline workers, for example, like about what they do. And I know there's a different question we'll get to later about some of the different functions of government, which I can expand about later. I find one of the most challenging aspects of public service is for members, government workers, bureaucracy, let's say, to really get comfortable. I've seen this over the years with the fact that we serve the government of the day, and that their priorities, we serve their priorities, and that those priorities can also change within a mandate. We give our best advice to ensure informed decisions are made. But at the end of the day, many decisions aren't really ours to make. And I find, like myself included, when I first started, that was a bit of a challenge and a struggle in terms of picking and getting comfortable in that space. Sometimes it is a tough balance between providing policy advice in a way that's neutral and unbiased, but it is critical to ensure that our teams do so as leaders. Operational realities can also provide challenges at times to delivering on the government's priorities. I had the opportunity, the challenge in a previous role when COVID, it's a global pandemic, and a lot of things changed operationally in terms of realities for any level of government, as well as in the private sector and for us as Ontarians in general. And that posed a lot of challenges. And I was in emergency management, Ontario, another arm of the provincial government at that time. So I could really see how operational realities really provided challenges there. In my 20 years at the province, I have only been part of one change in provincial government parties. When I started in 2006, it was the Liberal government, provincial Liberal government. And during their time, sure, the leaders changed, but the party didn't change until the current Conservative government in 2018. And I would say there was not really a time other than COVID where I found more challenging in terms of striking these balances between policy advice and operational realities and priorities of the government than during that time of transition. I'm sure Aisha's had other federal transitions as well, not because of the specific parties. That's irrelevant really to this answer. To me, it's that they were incoming and of which ones were incoming or outgoing, but it's really about all the policy and operational advice and realities had to be reviewed and reassessed, really to ensure that they were aligned with the incoming government's new priorities, but at the same time remain neutral and unbiased. So those are some of the challenges that I've observed and experienced here at my end.
Thank you for sharing that, Tipu. Yes, fearless advice, loyal implementation is something that I've grown up with in the public service. is when we are advising as policy analysts, and in executive roles, we are advising based on evidence. We are advising, it's nonpartisan, it's impartial to our own personal political views as well. And once it leaves our hands, and and there are the realities that senior management may have, their political priorities. When it comes time for implementation, there's a code of values and ethics that we all follow as public servants, regardless where in the levels or where in the hierarchy you are, and that's what we are here to do, the implementation. So thank you.
Yeah, can I just add to that too?
Sure, go for
Sorry,
it.
not to throw anyone off track, but I think this is a really important conversation because absolutely, the values of the public service, nonpartisan, we give advice to the democratically elected government. But I've also had questions from my team sometimes where they feel like they've provided certain advice, and then by the time it gets to the minister or to the deputy minister or to cabinet, their idea is taken out or watered down. And I think it's just important to talk about that for a moment, because it's also what happens through the system. And I've learned over the years that things get more complex the higher they go, because there's more lenses to put on top of it. And I want people to understand that. So everybody's input is valued and important. I look at the evidence, I look at all of the data, but when you might be working on something as an analyst and you're an expert in that area, but just as I said, everything is so interconnected between the federal government, the provincial government, municipal governments. It's interconnected amongst portfolios, ministers' portfolios, priorities in the government. So you have to keep putting these different lenses on it, and that kind of changes the way the advice has to be shaped. So I just want to make that clear as well, that it's not about removing advice. It's
Yeah.
about understanding all of the lenses. Our ministers, yes, they're elected through political party, but they also represent their constituents. So they might have double lenses, or they're working in partnership with another minister. So it's just something that not everybody is able to see, and I think it's important to mention.
That's a very good point. I remember the first time I wrote a briefing note as a policy analyst, and those of you who aren't in public service, it's a brief document that summarizes the issue, presents your recommendation on the policy, and it moves up the ladder to the hierarchy. By the time it came back signed, I couldn't recognize it. It wasn't my writing, and I almost wanted to cry because I'm like, oh my God, I got it all wrong, because it was my first one. And I then remember going to a training and a director telling all of us, like, this is nothing, none of this is personal. And he
Yeah.
talks exactly about what you're saying, Aisha. Like, it's the different lenses, the complexity of just what public service is. And it's as these lenses are applied, the advice it gets shaped based on that.
Yeah.
So thank you for thank you for mentioning that. I'm
Sorry.
going to you, Tipu.
Yep.
Because you talked about the diversity of the government when you were talking about your political government, your own experience in the public service in Ontario. Time to bust a myth, and I'm guilty of that too. When I walked into the public service, I was like, it's going to be all policy analysts, and it's going to be all international relations, maybe criminology folks that I'm going to be working with. I walked in with a sciences degree, so that's the kind of careers that are on in public service. So I probably don't have much of a future here. I'm still here 15 years later, but I want to hear from you. In your experience, what are the breadth and the variety of roles available across the government?
Sure. Thanks, Misbah. And now that I can actually hear the back and forth, that was a great addition that you did as well. And I appreciate that, because yeah,
you didn't hear us talking about you before then, eh?
No, exactly. That's why I'm still smiling. But yeah, I think before I get to your answer, Misbah, that was a great point. In terms of really peeling back that layer, like I would say, Misbah, to your point, even as a ADM, there will still be things that I approve that go up, and that there's lenses I don't appreciate, and they come back different, or the decision goes in a better way, which is why I was really emphasizing it's our best advice. I'm sure it happens at the federal level too. There are things that are called like, officials only meetings, where the bureaucracy is asked to leave, and often we don't even know what's being discussed there, but we serve the government the day. But that just goes to show it's not limited to any one position. Like even at the ADM level,
you think you landed on something and factored in all the layers and lenses, and there's still something that you're not aware of. So that was really great in terms of peeling back that layer a bit. In terms of this question, this was the most exciting one I had, really, Misbah, because you and I have been speaking about it beforehand. I'm sure it's the same with you, Aisha, through your experiences. But what I found, like, throughout the last few years with Max is there's often like these panels, whether it's in cyber, IT, medicine, engineering, law, etc. And each time I'm thinking, well, there are public servants that could participate on these panels as well. But we often kind of segregate like public service versus other, as if we're supposed to define public service where, you know, in one aspect vein, you can think of public service as just another type of employer amongst a menu of employers that somebody wants to pursue like their passion in. But I really enjoyed earlier on that when you were highlighting some of the Slido responses about why people want to pursue public service, about all those great reasons that they provided in terms of serving the public, etc. So really, I'm really happy we're having this session. I would say I can only speak to the provincial sector in Ontario. I heard there were other provinces as well, but I'm sure it's not too different. And it really, the examples I give to bust this myth really are at the provincial sector, because there are some things that are delegated to us, whereas the federal government retains some ownership on certain functions, municipality on a different. But whatever you, I would start by generalizing that whatever you hope to apply for in a job or get out of a job in the private sector, for example, is also possible to a large extent in one level of the public sector. So let's say, for example, you are practicing or are interested in applying or becoming, I'm going to run a list here, a data or research analyst, a political scientist, an engineer, a health practitioner, whether it's a nurse, doctor, researcher, a lawyer, legal services, finance, realty, social services, outreach and education, intergovernmental affairs, public safety, enforcement, whether it's paramedic, corrections, fire, in the fire sector, police officer, inspector, investigations capacity, an emergency management practitioner, a pilot, a customer service rep, supply chain and logistics, IT, cyber security, AI, etc. If you're interested in any of those fields, there's opportunities for you in the public sector, just as there is in the private sector. So really, I know we're not really asking the audience right now, but so what's really stopping others from really applying in the public sector as an employer as well? And I will end by saying, and guess what, to the audience, that's not a laundry list of things I just Googled or made up off the top of my mind. But in my almost 20 years in the Ontario government, I've been at the Ministry of Transportation in different areas. I've been in different ministries, Emergency Management Ontario, and now Consumer Protection Ontario. Everything I rhymed off are functions that were either a part of my team or other parts of government that supported and collaborated with my teams. So there's a whole lot of other careers that I haven't even named because they haven't intersected with my work. But I'll stop there and see if that helped, like Misbah, in terms of what we were discussing beforehand over the last several months about busting that myth about just how much is available in the public sector. And like I said, I'm just speaking at the provincial level.
No, that resonates with me as well, because I have not changed the department, but in this job that I currently have, I've worked with nurses, I've worked with epidemiologists, I've worked with social workers, but I've also worked with cloud developers, I've worked with accountants, I've worked with lawyers. And this is one person's experience. And these are the kind of opportunities that are available in the federal and provincial government. And I know the changes, there are changes that happen in all types of public service, as they do in private sector, as economies change and we adjust. But one of the great advice I have gotten to my mentor is, always be on the lookout for, where you want to be, and always be on the lookout, because when the train comes, get on it. You better be ready to get on it. And so thanks for sharing that perspective. I'm going to start looking through comments as well and bring them back to you, Tipu and Aisha, as well. But just a little bit of a change in terms of where people who are already in the public service, we often feel, depending on, I will say, like, based on this personal lived experience, there is a feeling of getting stuck at certain levels. And what strategies have you seen, Aisha, for you first, work well for kind of expanding the scope, the impact, or responsibility of your work over time?
It's a good question. Um, Look, like Tipu mentioned, there's so many different opportunities in the public service, and you can learn so much. So I'm just a gal from Manitoba. I was sad nobody put Winnipeg on that slide. I was hoping there would be some Manitobans with me. Maybe you're there. I'm a finance major who ended up working in intelligence. I had a diplomatic posting. I worked in policing. I worked in border. Now I'm immigration. I've done policy, operations, delivery, strategy, the whole gamut. And that's only because I have been curious. So, I mean, I think that is my number one thing. You know, people come to me sometimes and they ask me, like, what was your career path? How did you plan it out? I didn't. I'm not a good person to ask about like career plans. But what worked for me was I remained curious, I remained hungry to learn. And I talked to so many people. I was just literally like building relationships, finding out what other people were doing. It'll help you with your work, like to be able to do your work better, but it'll also help you with your network and future opportunities. And I can't stress enough how important networking is. And I want to take a second here because networking is not building a relationship with somebody so they're going to find you a job or they're going to, you know, you can slip them your resume. Networking is about genuinely being interested in the other person's work, because the more conversations you have, think of if you're going to go to a job interview, you make it past the first resume screening and now you're in a job interview. Through all the different people that you've talked to, you know new lingo, new buzzwords, you know how your portfolio might intersect with a different portfolio. And when you want to move through the ranks, you need to have that broader picture. You can't be only focused on what you're doing. If, you know, I've seen people who are computer engineers who have stayed computer engineers. Some because they wanted to, some have tried to get out. And I've seen people who are computer engineers who are like deputy ministers because they were curious about how other things impacted the work that they were doing. And they were able to move out of the technical into the policy. So, you know, don't think that you're not qualified for something. There's so many different ways to get into it, but you have to be open to it. Say yes to things that scare you, whether it's a you know, like in the federal government we have these different committees and projects. We have the Government of Canada Workplace Charitable Campaign, the GCWCC. I think the province has something similar. You know, we have the National Public Service Week. Get on these committees, get exposure to different leaders, observe people around you, how they think and what they say. It's super important. There's different diversity, equity, and inclusion committees and networks. But again, go there to be genuinely interested in the other people and their work, not to find a job. And I think that is going to guide you in what in where you go. And then the last thing I'll say, you know, this is maybe the spiritual, faithful part coming out for me, is that the times where I have tried to pursue a specific job, it didn't work out. But what works for me is knowing that, you know, I want to be served for a greater purpose. I want to serve for a greater purpose. So when you open yourself up and you are curious, you are open to having conversations, you take chances, great things will happen in your career.
Thank you for sharing that, Aisha. That's profound. It reminds me of my mom who says, you know, there's a saying, and it's in Islamic tradition, that when your plans break, that's when you really realize God. And
Yeah.
so, and it just like flashes back right there. And yes, interviews haven't turned out the way they haven't, but then I look back 6 months later, what happened
Oh
after that
yeah.
interview. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay, there was a good reason this didn't work out. So alhamdulillah, the faith definitely helps. Tifu, I'm going to turn to you. So what skills in your mind, distinguish those who are, who want to successfully move into senior leadership roles?
Yeah, thanks, Misbah. And I would say it's going to sound to the audience similar to a lot of things I just said, but I think it's important. Like, it's not about me trying to reinvent the wheel and add to something, because I think it's really important if there are similarities, and Aisha and I have never really met. We're at different levels of government. We come from different places, but if there's that consistency, I think that's important for people to hear as well. So similarly, I believe like some skills are visualizers, like really visualize where you want to be next and act, it's nothing we haven't heard before. Act the part now, like act the part now. What I call like climbers versus diggers. And I think I should touch on this a little bit too. Like don't always expect a linear upward trajectory in terms of your career, and try to find the positives and really self-belief to climb yourself out when things don't go the way you think they're supposed to go, rather than digging yourself into a larger hole. Like Aisha gave the example of, I think, computer programmers. I would say, like, there's people in all those different functions where I know people, they feel like years of service, I should have been promoted by now, but they don't demonstrate a lot of attributes that Aisha touched on, that I'll also touch on. But at the same time, it's like this, they're digging themselves deeper. And the more and more you go into those holes, I'll be quite honest, the less and less people want to be around you as well. And part of like that upward mobility is, let's be honest, like the person you want to hire you has to also like you and want you to be on a part of that team. I say long distance races. It's a long distance. Plan for the long distance. Don't chase every opportunity for the sake of chasing an opportunity or a title. I would say don't bemoan other people's successes. I've learned over this 20 years, like, I've become a manager before others. Others have become directors before me. I've become an ADM before others. Others have become. It's like in those. It's in those kind of carnival fair games. Like, like, support each other and don't begrudge others for their success. Misbah, you mentioned timing. When you're hot, you're hot. Like, if there's a time that makes sense and opportunity arises, don't fear the moment. Like, be curious, take that risk, and make a leap of faith. Because I was one of those people that I was at a Ministry of Transportation, but I was there for 13 years. It's one of those big ministries where people have started and retired from. And, I was comfortable for a while, but then I decided to take a leap of faith. And I've enjoyed my public service even more so because of the diversity it allowed. Just wrapping up a couple of things, I should already mentioned curiosity, empathy, transparency, enthusiasm. Yeah, you have to be able to prove you can deliver, but it's how you deliver as well, right? Consistently and collaborating across governments and ministries. I find, like, one of the things I found that worked, especially for people that are more from technical backgrounds, like the engineers, the computer sciences, etc. The higher you go up, you have to really be able to simplify things. You have to really be able to take technical and complex ideas and concepts and plain language them, so other people and decision makers really get the gist without losing the substance of the risks that are aligned with it. And finally, I'd say you have to really want to be creative and nimble to shape your policy advice to really align with government's priorities. Just because the government's priorities are a certain way doesn't mean like your policy advice has to be substantially different. You have to frame it in a way that really makes sense and speaks to the government of the day. And last, I would just end with this one is, honestly, I can share this in an audience like Max, but not necessarily with all the kind of career conversations I have with others that, aren't this Muslim Ummah audience, which is really, we have to really trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, really, in that what's written for us, we cannot unwrite, and what's unwritten for us, we can't write. So yes, I've worked hard. Aisha's worked hard. Others have worked hard in their fields, demonstrated many of the traits and qualities we've described. But I don't think we're also naive enough to think that it could have also gone another way for us. like we're no different or more special than others who probably are better in some of these traits than us. And at this moment of time, we are where we are, and it's with hard work, and luck and opportunity. But there's also a divine will that I think it's hard to really explain that to people who aren't of faith. But I think in this group, I can share that as well. So I'll stop there.
And Ms. Busser, I don't want to belabor the point, but I see a question from Mobeen who might be, and it might be relevant to this, but there's a question that says, what differentiates high performers who advance from those who plateau and remain at the same level? And I think just as part of this conversation, I would say the ability, the capacity for continuous learning. That is something that I look for in everybody that I bring onto my team. The reason being because the world is changing so fast. And in the public sector, we're trying to keep up with those changes, and it's very hard. So, just as we talked about, you can be an engineer or a finance major and work in intelligence or policy. You need to have the ability, like, what are your transferable skills? It's not necessarily the subject matter expertise, it's your ability, your proven ability to adapt and to continuously learn the new environment around you.
That's great. That's wonderful insight. And yeah, I was going to that question, so I'm glad you addressed it, Aisha, as well. Another one, Tipu, you kind of segued to it already, but it's appearing a couple of times in the chat. We are at Muslims Achieving Excellence um, uh, webinar. So a question that comes up is, as senior leaders, how do you balance your values, your faith-based values in public service? So maybe I'll go to Tipu, you first, and then Aisha, you next, in terms of, what role does faith play in your role as leader?
Sure. So I think I'll start by saying, like, I view as leaders within a level of government, regardless of level, I feel like there's like a couple of lanes that or roles we play. There's one in terms of what people think about, like the outcome, the delivery in terms of policy or operations. But I also say, like, as an employer, there's also a role there that I don't think in, um, gets well understood in terms of leading the teams. So because I do believe, I think there's a question or a comment in there about how we align our values with a delivery as well. I'm just paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like, some of the things Aisha has mentioned and I've mentioned, I think really already align in terms of the values and traits and attributes. Like, as Muslims, we're supposed to pursue excellence. We're supposed to treat people well, etc. And how some of those attributes I think have already taken care of. But I do feel like I'm not going to go into like political aspects in terms of the governments we serve of the day. But I would say, like, we have teams that struggle as well, right? Like, there's in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and there's been very, even outside of world events over the last couple of years, which have been really difficult to support like staff in. There's also just the realities of being Muslims in an employer setting. And as leaders, when I first started in the OPS, and I'll say even right now, like at the ADM level in Ontario, I don't think I can't really name it many Muslims that are at the ADM level, let alone the deputy level. And there wasn't really representation. So I think an important role we play as leaders is to strive for these positions, not necessarily just for the delivery of the policy work, but also in terms of representing and being examples to the public service, the employees, the teams, the staff. Because when I was coming up, I didn't see anyone that I felt I could speak to on certain things that affected me. Like, back then, in some cases, buildings like praying in stairwells or not having anything place to go for wudu. These type of everyday fundamentals, like people assuming the Ramadan celebrations were more about opportunities for samosas, which I don't know about in the federal government, but they're very popular in the provincial sector for fundraising. They think it's samosa parties. There's a lot of education, et cetera, that goes on. So I feel like these are some of the things that we have to really demonstrate at that level. It's tough to say, again, to an earlier one of my answers was, like, we have to be able to provide our best advice to the government of the day, and they make the decisions. So it's hard to really weave in your personal, like, faith and ethics into that to be truly unbiased. But I think there's two levels there that we work on: what we do in terms of the advice to the government on our everyday job, but then also as leaders supporting teams and what we can do for the employers. And I'll end by saying, I think just about 2.5 years ago, the Ontario provincial government, they have what are called employee networks, which are recognized networks. And we created one called UMA, which was the first faith-based employee network within the Ontario Public Service, at least. And I know there's one for the federal government that's been around for a while, but it's the first one we did here to really support Muslims within the Ontario Public Service with the everyday parts of employment.
Amazing. And the fact that it took that many years, because I know Muslim public servants have been around in Ontario Public Service for a while. So it's good, long time coming, but I'm glad it's there. Aisha, your take on this?
Oh, you left the hard one for last. Look, we are choosing to be in the public service. Okay, we've chosen to be public servants, leaders in the public service. Some of you may be choosing to go into the public service. So we have to accept it for what it is. We have to accept that the public service exists to serve the democratically elected government. Public service values align with my personal values. If the values of the organization you work for do not align with your personal values, don't work there.
Yeah.
Do I always agree with the decisions the government makes? That's personal to me as Aisha. And I can show whether or not I agree through my vote. We live in a democratic country. So I speak up when I need to, when it comes to, look, anytime we're giving advice, we have to put together all of the considerations. So, what are the stakeholder considerations, the policy and mandate considerations, communications, budget, finance, whatever, legal considerations. If it's illegal, if it is against the law, I won't do it. And I will tell people this is against the law, we can't do it. No one's ever said do it anyways. But that's kind of the line there. If it's against the values of the public service, I won't do it. And I have had to have conversations sometimes where I say, I think what we're being asked to do is a little bit, against what public servants do. There's ways to address that. There's things that, the government can do, elected leaders can do that the public service won't do. So we make sure that those lines don't get blurred. Reframing them. I know what objective you're trying to achieve, but there's a different way to do it so that it still aligns with our values. But these are choices that we make. And I have to, as a senior public servant, I can't necessarily separate my public service life from my personal life because there's a lot of intersections and things we can't do. But I also have to remember who I am as a person and what channels and avenues I have to, voice my opinions, but my values do align with the values of the public service.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, that's great to hear. I think we addressed a lot of the questions in the comments with those questions. So thank you for taking the time to delve into it. I know we are down to the last couple of minutes, so maybe 1 minute each for both of you. And this is partly selfish because I do lead MAX Mentorship, and I want to hear your take on mentorship. I know I've gone to Tipu, even though we don't work in the same levels. I've gone to him for mentorship advice, particularly at a time when I was in self-doubt. So I know for me, mentorship has done wonders. But how about you guys? How do you see mentorship or sponsorship influencing career? So let's start with Tipu first.
Sure. And I think, Aisha, you spoke about this a bit earlier in one of your answers as well. So I would say, candidly, early in my career, I didn't really seek out mentorship or networking like early in my career. I was getting settled into the job. I would be honest, I'm more of an introvert on the scale than an extrovert. And I've, over the years had to learn to kind of force myself in the middle to do things like this as well. And part of that is the networking part, which is as I moved up in the OPS, I started understanding the importance to myself, but as I mentioned earlier, the importance to others too for representation in terms of mentorship. So I do see a lot of value in it now. I just spoke to some of these aspects beforehand as well. Like, it's really important for me to learn from others because otherwise I can lose touch with what's happening as I move up in the organization. Like I can't really help lead if I don't understand some of the issues that people and team members are dealing with, even if they're not on my team. Like I always tell people I wear two hats. Yes, I'm the assistant deputy minister of my division in my ministry, but I'm also my second hat as an OPS executive. And I want the OPS to be a best possible employer possible. So I need to hear from others and learn from them and understand what kind of challenges they're facing. But at the same time, I believe it can only be mutually conducive if I'm also honest and transparent with my career path. And I've learned over the years how, again, representation matters, where people seek me out because they see a bit of themselves in me to try to assist and support. And I would just say now that I'm on board with mentoring, it doesn't stop. So I've been here for 20 years. I've continued to maintain. It's an effort. I would end by saying this. It's an effort. It takes intention by people. It doesn't happen by magic. Yes, you can cold call or email a few executives and ask them for their time. Often they'll say yes, but you really have to make it worthwhile for both of you. And really, it takes time to maintain. You got to really maintain it. You can't just be that person who's just messaging when you need something. Like, it does take intention, and I've had to put work into maintaining my own personal network of mentors, and I have never really expanded beyond the OPS, but now I'm starting to as well, because not because I'm looking to leave the OPS, but I see the value of getting other people's insights and experiences outside of my little echo chamber, which is the Ontario government. So 20 years in, you still don't stop looking for mentors and mentees as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll try to be quick. I know we're at time. Tipu said a lot of great things, like have those conversations, but he did mention that mentorship it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So I will always find time, inshallah, to meet with somebody who wants to meet with me or chat with me. But mentorship is a relationship that is two-way, because you learn from each other and you need to be able to click. So I wouldn't, go off the bat and send someone an email and say, hey, can you be my mentor? That's not going to work. But have a conversation, ask them if they're willing to give their time for some career advice or for some advice, and then go in prepared. I have accepted meetings where someone's just staring at me and I'm like, I have no shortage of things to say. I can fill the space, but I don't know if you're getting out of it what you want. So go in prepared. Get lots of advice. And I tell this to everybody that I talk to. If I can give you advice on something, I can give you my experience. If it doesn't feel good for you, ask a lot of other people until you hear something that feels like it's you, because just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And then just finally, on sponsorship, that is on leaders. So that's where leaders take the initiative and we bring up your name at tables. I've had sponsorship through my career, honestly, mostly from white men in my industry. And that has definitely impacted my career. So be curious, always want to learn, network, be genuine, reach out to people, and someone will see you and they will want to sponsor you.
Thank you very much. That's valuable advice. So if anybody's looking, it's great advice if you're looking for mentorship and how do you, even as a mentee, and what you give back as a mentor, it all matters. So I want to thank both of you for your time, Aisha and Tipu. Thank you to the audience for joining us for this webinar. If you missed part of it, it will be online on YouTube on our MAX channel. And inshallah, we'll be entering Ramadan. So Ramadan Mubarak to all of you in advance. And we will see you at the next webinar. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.